right, there we go. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for popping on for this training regarding reporting for counties for their 2024 annual reporting. We're going to cover a number of things, score related, and show how a lot of the data from other reports tie together with score today, and hopefully it'll be good information for everybody. So first things first. Let's go ahead and do introductions. So I think a lot of people know me already. I'm Ben Kroll. I'm the score coordinator for the state. And Scott Parr is also going to be doing a little presenting today. He works with the facility reporting, but he had a conflict earlier on in the meeting. So he'll be joining us later. And then I'll let Gabby introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Gabby Rosenthal, and I manage our hauler reporting program with the state.
Okay. Just real quick though, let's go ahead and save the questions for the end of our presentation. That way we can keep things going, and there's a good chance that we might actually answer your question as we're going through. So save them to the end, and there should be plenty of time for questions at the end as well. So let's go ahead and fire it up, Gabby. All right, so today the main things we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about understanding the state solid waste data. We'll talk a little bit about what SCORE is used for and what resources are available to help you complete your SCORE report. And then we're going to also touch on some hauler reporting and how that can help you get information to complete your SCORE report. There's also going to be another hauler reporting session tomorrow at 2:30. And then Gabby's going to show how to access your hauler reports as well, and kind of give you some tips for what to look for and what you should be doing as you're accessing your hauler reports, and making sure that they're all completed and completing your hauler licensing form and SCORE. And then we'll talk a little bit about facility reporting as well. And again, if you're a county that has a facility, there's going to be a training session tomorrow at 1:00. Scott Parr will be doing a lot with that, and that should be useful information for that as well. So why do we collect all this data? I guess that's the biggest question. And why we collect the data is to make sure to track our progress and how we're doing in terms of meeting our goals and our hierarchy that's established in the Waste Management Act. So I think we've all seen the waste hierarchy before. Obviously, reduction is the main thing that we want to do with our waste. We want to reduce the amount and the toxicity of our waste. And then beyond that, then we can want to start separating materials out for energy and recovery of that material as well. So recycling and waste energy. And ultimately, it's reducing our dependence on disposal of solid waste, in particular landfilling. And the Waste Management Act also talks about coordinating with other political subdivisions so we can so we can coordinate the orderly and deliberate development of waste facilities. All right. So, oh, I'm sorry. This is Gabby.
So just to give a big picture overview of what the flow of solid waste data collected in the state looks like, we can kind of see the map of this data flowing, starting with the hauler reports. They tell us where waste is collected, so the point of generation, and then the first point of tip for that waste that haulers are moving. And then from there, annual facility reports tell us the total tonnage accepted at transfer stations, and then where that waste is transferred to. And then lastly, our annual facility reports give us data on the total tonnage accepted at landfills, as well as waste to energy facilities. All of this can be used to help counties gain some of the data needed and cross-check information that will be helpful with their SCORE reports. So these are the categories that are required for haulers to report collection information on. That includes both residential and commercial recyclables, trash, and organics and yard waste. Next year in 2025 as well, they will have the option to report on some C&D and reuse categories as well. Haulers report to us the first point of tip for materials, including whether they're dropping off at a waste to energy, an MSW landfill, a transfer station, or a compost or recycling facility. From there, the facility data, we'll go into it more detail later on, but it tells us the tons received by material type, transfer destination information, the breakdown of recyclable materials, total amounts of MSW versus C&D or industrial waste disposed, and then fee info on the cost for disposal for those materials. Back to you, Ben.
Okay, so from the hauler reporting and the facility reporting, that's really the information that you as counties are going to use to aggregate together to complete your score report. So score, you guys are going to give a total generation of MSW recycling and organics generated in your county. And that helps us develop or helps us determine what your recycling rate is for your county. And like I said, though the score report includes information from haulers and facilities, and as well as other sources like direct to end market haulers in your county as well. Next slide. So what do we use SCORE for as a state? The biggest thing we use SCORE for is the score report. We complete that and publish that every single year, and we publish the state recycling rate along with all the recycling rates for each county throughout the state. We're still working on the 2023 score report, but we're really close to being ready to publish that. It should be out it should be out before the end of the month. Another thing that we use score data for is in solid waste management planning. We use it to set the baseline for the goal volume table within the solid waste management plans. It's also used in the Metro Policy Plan and Master Plan for Metro counties as well. And we also use it in the Certificate of Need process. The Certificate of Need is kind of based on the goal volume table that's from each county's plan. So it's really important that we get this information correct. And one thing that we've kind of found, especially more recently, but it's always been a little bit of an issue, is that we're not the data that's being reported for SCORE, especially on the MSW, the landfill and the waste to energy side, it's not accurate. And it's not every county, mind you, but a lot of them are not accurate. And for most of the time, it is because the information is complete. The data is incomplete. So you may know most of what's happening to your waste out there, but there's lots of times there's waste that's leaving your normal system in your county that you're unaware of. And it's really important that you know where all that waste is going. And I'll talk about this a little bit later as well, but you need to know where your waste liabilities are. And we need that data to be accurate so that we can issue the correct amount of CON capacity for these landfills to make sure that there's enough capacity to handle all the land disposal needs that you guys have for your counties. We don't want to issue too much, but we don't want to issue too little as well. And that's why it's super important that we continue to have this data be accurate. So beyond solid waste management plans as a certificate of need, we also use it for us to set policy plan initiatives, legislative initiatives, et cetera, on our end. But in general, SCORE data is very much the foundation of most solid waste functions throughout the agency and the state. Next. So why is it important to counties? I already mentioned before, it's really important that you guys know where your liabilities are, meaning if waste is going to a landfill that you didn't think it was going to, or you didn't want it to go to, you need to know that it's going there. And a lot of you guys have local controls in place to make sure that waste is going where you want it to go, whether that be through financial flow control or actually a waste designation. So you guys need to use that score data and you guys complete that data. So it's really important that it's accurate and you know where it's going for those purposes to make sure that your local controls are being followed and you know where your liabilities are. Another great thing that score data can help you with is it helps you quantify the success of the programs that you've implemented. If you have accurate data, you know where your our areas of opportunity are. And from there, you can make a plan and develop programs to hopefully address those areas of opportunity. And then down the road, once you've implemented those programs, you can see how successful they were. So it's another great thing that score data can do for you. And finally, it's nice to be able to use that data in public relations settings, whether it's talking to the media or your county board. You can let them know. You could show them where you're either deficient and you need some extra resources to be more successful, or you can show them that the extra resources did do what they were intended to do. So, next slide. Okay, so when you get to the point where you're ready to complete your score report, there's several different places that will give you some advice/guidance on how to complete your score report. Next slide. So the first place is the score announcement email. I send that out every year, usually mid to late January, so it should be coming out here soon. I highlight anything that's going to be new for the year. I also like to highlight places where, mistakes have been made in the past and, pitfalls to avoid in completing the score report. And the big thing that I send out to everybody is the score financial information. I let you guys know how much we sent you for the previous calendar year, and as well as what your carryover balance was leading into that calendar year. So this year, I'll tell you how much money you received in 2024 and what your carryover balance was at the end of 2023. Please, it's one of the most common mistakes in the score report. Please look at that. Please, if your carryover balance, if your auditor says it was different, then you need to figure out why and do a balance transfer or balance adjustment, I should say. But that's one of the most common mistakes. Please look at that and make sure that what you're putting into the score report matches that. And if it doesn't, let's, work with me and we'll try and figure it out. And then the other thing that I usually include is the weight conversion tables. It's the single sort conversion. Lots of times your haulers don't give you a broke out by material for the recycling. They just give you the amount that they picked up, single sort, and you can use that to break that out into the appropriate materials. And then we can also, you also have common materials that get recycled that may not have been weighed, but like fluorescent bulbs or appliances or electronics. That gives you the opportunity to say, okay, I've recycled so many appliances. They're on average this many pounds. So I will just figure out how many pounds it was and convert it to tons. Next slide. And then finally, I also have a score guidebook that is posted on our website. It provides a lot of the same things that the announcement email does, but goes into a little bit more detail on how to complete forms and retrack, provides more guidance about what should be included in the forms, and also addresses a lot of the frequently asked questions regarding what should we include in score, lots of different financial questions that get brought up a lot that are there. So if you do have questions, I would say feel free to go take a look at that guidebook. Sometimes there may very well be an answer to that question already. Yeah, that should do it. Turn it over to Gabby again.
All right. So why do we ask our haulers to report in Minnesota? Hauler reporting helps us really get an accurate picture so we can build good public trust in our waste disposal, recycling, and organics recovery systems. I know there's a lot of misinformation about recycling out there that we all want to dispel so we can have public trust in our local systems. Hauler reporting helps us really understand the ramifications of the waste generation in our communities, whether that's good or bad. And then it helps us understand truly the flow of material from generation to tip. This is really essential when it comes to certificate of need, as well as score data collection. We've had a lot of challenges getting accurate pictures on where material is transferred. So if we have hauler data that is correct, it helps us be able to look in further detail and know where that material was generated, not just where it was transferred. And then lastly, hauler data helps us better assess what waste is generated where so that we can plan for our infrastructure, our recycling and waste diversion programming, and other public education and environmental resource protection programming that we might be planning. So here we have the WHO. Haulers of any mixed municipal solid waste, that includes recyclable materials as well as organic material, both commercial and residential collection, need to report according to statute 115A 93. So how do we get accurate hauler data as counties? Here's a brief outline to give you a picture of how we can improve this. You can always access your previous year's hauler data via your retrack account that you use for SCORE. There, we want you to verify and update your county's licensed hauler list in your annual SCORE report. That's super, super essential to making sure that we know who is hauling in your county. From there, please work with your end management facilities to know where materials are flowing. If they notice anything that is changing over time, you want to make sure that they know which haulers are using their facilities and you know as well. Please make sure you're cross-checking the data from hauler reports, facility reports, and SCORE to make sure that we see consistency across the board and we know that we're getting accurate pictures with our data. And then for any haulers that are non-compliant or you notice have incorrect data in their reports, you can refer them to the MPCA website for instructions on how to complete their retrack reports or have them reach out. We will be doing a training session specifically for haulers tomorrow as well. So in order to verify and update your county's SCORE licensed hauler list, you can, like I said, log into retrack and access your SCORE report. From there, you should see your licensed hauler list form. And in order to determine their compliance with the statute, we do need that comprehensive list of haulers with contact information and details to know what type of material they collect. Once you open up that form, it should look a little bit like this. It may auto-populate with your previous year's info if you've already completed this form before, and each year you'll only have to update it. So if you have any haulers who are no longer operating, have sold their business, or there are new haulers in your area, please make sure that each year you're checking to make sure that those changes are reflected. If you have any cities or townships or public works in your county, please make sure that all of those entities are listed as a hauler in your report. A really common one that we see is Parks Department or Public Works for a city will do the hauling for their specific parks or public housing buildings, things like that. So they need to be listed as a hauler as well, since they're picking up material, collecting it, and tipping. Please make sure that every year you are updating this list and noting whether that hauler is a transfer only hauler, whether they pick up MSW and recycling, or if they're a C&D hauler. When your list is completed, it should look like this. And each year you can go in and remove haulers that are no longer accurate or add ones, make any changes that you need to. From there, if you want to be able to see a report of what data your haulers have completed each year, you can access that by logging into your account. It should look like this as you enter Retrack. You can click on the Analytics tab and export a hauler report. You can generate these reports by year. So the most recent completed year we'll have right now is 2023, but soon you should have your 2024 reports in February. Just to touch a little bit more on why it's important that we update that hauler license list. Doing so allows all of the counties to identify which haulers haven't been reporting as required in our program. So if your license list is accurate, you should be able to know if that hauler has or has not reported in the program. It also tells you whether or not a hauler is operating within your jurisdiction, and make sure that you don't lose out on any license fees that you might get, or a hauler might not be following any of your local controls if you have waste designation. So it's super important we all have an accurate picture of who is hauling in your county. To that end, if you do not have a licensing ordinance for your solid waste collectors already, please reach out to your planner with any questions on this. They can help you make sure that that is in order. And then lastly, this hauler license list will help you to, as we've already said, know what your certificate of need and planning data looks like when the picture is more accurate. To give you an idea of where we are with hauler reporting right now, in 2022, our average compliance rate was 56%. This is looking a little bit better for 2023 as we go in and have been trying to verify that data and improve it. But that compliance rate is still low. And it is low for a few reasons. One, many counties have haulers that are reporting that aren't on the license list. Some licensed haulers are not reporting at all. And there may be some haulers who are operating but are not licensed in a given county at all. And then we have had a lot of staffing challenges here at the MPCA and haven't been able to follow up and do any quality assurance or quality checks. But this is my role now, part of my role, and I'm working to try to make sure that we can improve this data for all of us to use going forward. One note here is it's also really important to make sure that your C&D haulers are registered, because most C&D haulers are going to have loads that are contaminated, or they might have a yard waste load, and those numbers are small, but they're not in compliance if they deliver any MSW at all, or yard waste. So let's work together to make sure we have improvements to our hauler reporting clients. Both counties and state play a big role in trying to have data that we can all use in our planning processes. The county licensing authority is sort of our biggest compliance piece. If a hauler is not participating in the program, you all have the ability to step in and say, hey, you're not complying with your county license. We need you to make sure you're doing this in order to meet compliance for our license. Additionally, you all have a much better picture of what is happening in your local area than I do. So your knowledge is critical to know who is hauling in your county and what materials they're taking where. You all in turn benefit from hauler reporting by having fewer gaps in the data. There won't be as many blind spots. You'll have an accurate picture of what waste is moving in and out of your county and where, and then should help in turn with your reporting requirements to the state. With some assistance from the haulers, you might not have as much work to do when you're gathering data for your score report. And lastly, like Ben said before, it's essential to know where your waste disposal liabilities are. We've got to know where the waste is generated and ultimately where it's going to end up. A few tips to help us ensure we have better hauler data. Talk to your landfill operators, your transfer stations, and other facilities to make sure that they're familiar with all of the individual hauling companies. They're going to notice if new trucks or new companies are using that facility, which could tell them if waste is coming from a new location or a new hauler is hauling that material. So they might need to be licensed if they aren't already. If a facility notices that different trucks that normally would be coming to the facility have stopped coming in, then it'll tell them that either the service area has changed and those trucks are going to a different facility, or maybe a hauler is no longer operating. And then to that end, speaking with your operators can tell you if they're seeing a big fluctuation in waste amounts. It could be an indicator of local controls not being followed. So it's good to be in touch with all of these folks. A few resources for haulers in completing their retrack reports. If they navigate to the solid waste reporting page on the MPCA website, under the hauler reporting heading, there are these free videos that are really quick, and we'll walk them through the process of setting up reporting and filling out the few basic forms that they need to. And as well, they can always reach out to me if they have specific questions on the process. Here's just a quick overview of the reporting deadlines we have for haulers. Annual reports are all due in February, and then in the metro area counties, haulers have to report quarterly, with Q4 being due in February as well. Beyond hauler reporting, since we only get that first tip point, we do really look to facility data for our landfill, waste to energy, and transfer station information. So that is all important for counties finally in their planning and determining volumes for their solid waste management plan and certificate of need requests. If your first point of tip is a transfer station, oftentimes more digging is required. So contact that transfer station to know where the waste is flowing in their end destination and determine if that is consistent with your solid waste management plan, because sometimes we found it's not. Right, back to you, Ben.
All right, thank you. All right, so once you've looked into the hauler reporting and you make sure that you've gotten all the information from the haulers that you need, and worked with the facilities to determine where the final destination is while your waste that's being hauled by the haulers, then you can finally start to aggregate that information and dump it into your score report every year. So in the score report, there's currently 6 forms that you need to complete in Retrack annually. The only one that's the exception to that is the program details form. That's completed once every 5 years, and that's due this year. So when you're completing your score report this year, the score program details form will be opened up for you. The questions are really similar compared to the last time. We've added a little bit to it and tweaked it a little bit, but in general, it's the same thing. And then, of course, there's source reduction, materials collected for recycling, waste generations, licensed haulers, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide. All right, so the form that you're probably going to spend the most time on is the materials collected for recycling form. Um, it's the form where you get to report the amount that you did recycling, that you recycled from your county each year. So that's going to include your traditional recyclables as well as organics and reuse now as well. So the sources of data for that, hauler reports again. That's why it's so important that we get them all. I collect information from commercial partners, Walmart, Target, Home Depot, Cub Food slash Super Value, and I think that's it. And I get information from the major food banks in Minnesota as well. It's like Second Harvest Heartland. Um, I usually get those mid to late March. It's usually later March. Just understand that I get like I send that out as soon as I possibly can. Like if you don't have it, I'm still waiting for information. There's no reason to email me and ask me if I have the information yet, because as soon as I get it all in, it goes out like as soon as possible because I know you all are looking for it. Um, and then you also need to get information from other entities that ship their recyclables direct to end market. Um, that would be like a hardware store or a grocery store that has a cardboard baler in the back. Like for example, when I used to work for Jackson County, the grocery store in Jackson, they had a cardboard baler in the back, and there was a company that did a milk run and would collect those little grocery stores and pick up all their cardboard. Um, you get the opportunity, it's always a good thing to try to find as much of that information as possible to take credit for the recycling that's happening within your county. The main thing is, though, that the material needs to be documented. So you can't just be, well, you know, I'm guessing there's probably a handful of people out there that do cardboard that I don't know about, so I'm just going to estimate there's enough 500 tons of cardboard out there. No, you need to know where it's coming from and have a good idea of how much it is. Next slide. Um, so materials that should not be included would be materials that would be managed separately and not destined for an MSW landfill. So industrial solid waste is if it's ISW, it should not be included in score. C&D on the recycling side, we've been including C&D on the recycling side for the most part because first we want to encourage that practice, and we know that there is a significant amount of C&D that ends up in MSW landfills due to contamination. So we have been allowing C&D that's being recycled to be included in SCORE, even though it's technically not MSW. So if I tell you that you can't include something, just know I'm giving you a break on C&D. So I try to be as fair as possible in both ways. So yeah, ISW, things that are part of a manufacturing process, like cutoffs or things like that, off-spec materials, those types of things can't be included in SCORE. But however, there can be calculations and conversions that are made if the exact weights aren't available. Like I talked about with the grocery store, they don't weigh those cardboard bales as they come out, but they probably have a good idea about how much those bales weigh and about how many they send out every month. Um, you can do that. You can talk to them and multiply the average weight times the bales that they consider themselves to generate each year and use that as a good calculation. It's not an estimate, it's a calculation as to how much cardboard they generate and recycle every year. Next slide. And then again, like I said, reuse is now being collected in SCORE as well. It's on page 2 of the materials collected for recycling report form, I mean. And reuse just means a product or material that is maintained in its original form without significant alteration used again for its original or similar purposes. You guys can read the definition. So if you have reuse to report, there's, like I said, on the second page, you need to click yes if you have that, and then there'll be another list of materials that you can list as being reused. I know sometimes it's hard to, fit all the different materials into those categories. Do your best to do so. I want to try and keep that list, kind of as short as possible. Um, I don't want it to get way too extensive because it starts to become less meaningful in terms of data if that list gets incredibly long. All right, next slide. All right, waste generation. And I think, as I mentioned before, I think this is probably where we see the most issues in terms of accuracy in score reporting. Uh, because I feel like there's counties that are having a difficult time tracking their waste from where it's being collected to its final destination. And again, it's not so much that the data that they're entering is inaccurate, it's incomplete. So it's really important that you try to get the full picture, and that's why it's really important to get hauler reporting to be in compliance as much as possible so that you can know exactly where your waste is going. And we can, as planners, we can get you information regarding, what facilities are reporting that they received waste from your county as well. But the first step is, and you should be able to track that waste just through the hauler reporting in general anyways. So, but we can definitely, if you have questions or if you're really doing some in-depth investigation, we will get you facility reports or we'll get you information from the facilities to let you know where your waste is being flowed or where your waste is flowing. And just remember that if you have a facility within your county, report the waste that's only the waste that's generated by your county that enters that facility. So if you have a landfill and you're receiving waste from other counties as well, what you report on score for landfill is only the waste that your county delivered to that landfill, not what the surrounding counties that also utilize your landfill sent to your facility as well. And then there's also the on-site disposal piece of the waste generation form. Try to do your best to estimate the number of residents that don't have access to hauling service or a location to self-haul. There are a lot of different ways. There's a number of ways that lots of counties are doing their best to make that estimate. I think it kind of depends on what information you have available to you. So I may not necessarily be the best person to ask for information on how to make those estimates. I would definitely talk to your peers and see how they're coming up with those estimates because some of them do a really nice job. I'd like it to be as accurate an estimate as possible rather than just a wag at it. So, and then finally, you need to list in that waste generation report the licensed haulers that have yet to report in retract for your county. So as Gabby mentioned, you can go access your hauler report and you can look to see if all of your haulers have reported. The ones that haven't reported, you need to list those in that waste generation form as well. Next slide. Revenues and expenditures. Talked about this a little bit earlier. I do send out the financial information. Please use that spreadsheet so you can put that information in accurately. Basically, if you want to ask about eligible expenditures, basically anything waste management related is score eligible with the exception of landfilling. If it's landfill that's not eligible, it's not eligible for score dollars to be spent on it. Pretty much everything else is eligible. But if you do have questions about what is eligible and what isn't eligible, if you want to see the statute, it's 115A .557. And then talk a little bit about carryover balances. We're fine with carryover balances being there. Just understand that negative carryover balances can send the wrong message. I fully admit, and I think the agency understands that counties do contribute significantly more revenue to the SCORE program than what the SCORE grant is covering right now. I think it's about an 80-20 split, 80% local compared to 20% state funding. And I understand that you want to show that negative balance to show that you're being underfunded. But it puts a little bit of stress on us, and it's hard for me to, like, I can't just say this is local funding when you do a carryover balance adjustment the next year to show that, oh yeah, we were negative $80,000, and then that all went away because we just covered it out of our general fund. That I can't necessarily put, I can't put that in local funding. So I feel like it's better to show and put it in the actual funding part, the revenue slot, general, whether it's general fund or some kind of local fund, to show that you are actually contributing that money, because balance adjustments are made for more reasons than just covering shortfalls in state funding. And again, refer to the spreadsheet, please. Next slide. Source reduction. This is mostly free text. It just gives you the opportunity to talk about public and your own source reduction activities within the county, and whether it's you directly doing that or like a public.
And you're muted.
Okay, I'm not sure how that happened. Thank you. So source reduction is reusing a product in its original form. That's increasing the lifespan of the product, material or toxicity reduction, changing in procurement, consumption, or waste generation habits. Now, the main thing there does seem to, and I haven't done a lot of QA/QC on the source reduction form over the years. That's hopefully going to change here the next year or two. A lot of it, just remember that source reduction isn't discard management. So if you're switching from, I used to throw this thing away and now I recycle it, that's not source reduction. But if you, instead of recycling it, you actually reuse that thing, that is source reduction. So just keep that in mind. And I have some more information about source reduction and how you can determine whether it's source reduction or something else. That's also in the SCORE guidebook. Next slide. All right. As I mentioned, this year is a program details form year. Essentially, the program details form is a list of questions that helps inform us on what your collection system is. And so your way to report that you are providing all the services that are needed to meet the opportunity to recycle statute. And then also give us some information about organics management and sustainable purchasing. Next slide. Okay, so final overview. The SCORE report is due April 1st. Again, the commercial partner recycling data comes mid to late March. I'll send it to you as soon as I get it. Please take the time to evaluate your hauler reporting to ensure you know where your waste is flowing, and so that the sooner we get that compliance rate up, the goal is to be able to rely on that hauler reporting to complete a lot of the things that you have been reporting, like in the waste generation form. And once we get to that point, hopefully we can take that off of you, and instead of having you collect all that information and aggregate that information, we can just take and do that for you and send it out, and it's just a check on your part. It's like, yes, this is accurate, looks good. The goal is to take some of that legwork away from you. And finally, if there's changes to county contacts, we do have a contact change that's on our website, but feel free to contact your planner for your area if you have changes to your county contacts, and we can definitely get that form to you and then send it right back to us, and we'll get our contact lists updated as necessary. And I think that's it, right, Gabby? Yeah. Yeah, so I think we can, Scott Parr is going to talk a little bit as well, but let's go ahead and take a few minutes to answer any questions you may have had regarding hauler reporting or score reporting. And I think we got some in the chat. Have you been looking at those, Gabby?
I can read them off to you folks for answers. And if people have more questions, please put them into the chat and we can ask. I think maybe you can unmute yourself and ask them or raise your hand and we'll go from there. The first question was a licensing question, Gabby. We license our junk haulers, but they are considered self-haulers for the solid waste management tax. Should we list them in the score report?
I can say we do have junk haulers who are reporting. And moving forward, into 2025, they'll have the option to report reuse and C&D, which is often relevant to those junk haulers. So it is certainly helpful for us if you list them in your licensed haulers, just so we're aware of who is hauling material where.
Is reporting to us, I mean, I guess the question would be is if reporting to us is a condition of that license that you're giving them, I think you definitely want to have them listed. If not, I mean, if you feel like the amounts are so small and if most of that stuff's coming to your facility anyways, and that you have access to that information, Sharon, I think you can leave them off. But I think if they're reporting to us, you should list them on, or if that's a condition of your license, they should be listed in score.
All right. The next question is totals for commercial versus residential is difficult to determine. So this county goes to the haulers and see what they reported. Is there a way to reconcile that, or do you recommend something else that might help counties determine how much is residential and how much is commercial?
You want me to take a stab at that, Gabby?
Go for it.
Okay. I mean, I would say your haulers are going to be the ones that are going to have the best idea on that anyways. They're going to know how many stops are commercial, how many stops are residential, and the size of the containers that they have at those facilities as well. So I understand there's really no way for you to reconcile that. But I mean, the haulers are the ones that give you the best information when it comes to commercial versus residential split anyways. So, yeah, I think that's the most accurate place to get that information. Wouldn't you agree, Heidi?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why it's so essential to make sure that all your haulers are reporting and their information is correct.
This question was answered within the chat, but not everyone has access to the chat. So I'm going to ask it again and you can address it. Is there a feedback loop that I might not be familiar with to check in real time which haulers have and have not reported before the score report is due?
Yes. So if you go to the analytics tab that I showed earlier, I can navigate back to that slide. If you go to this analytics tab, you can download your hauler report. If you're in the metro, there'll be another line item for your individual counties report. And these are updated live as so you have access. Just note the deadlines for hauler reporting are February 1st. So if you're downloading it now, it might not be complete for 2024.
Isn't it March 1st now?
It's February.
Okay. Oh, it's just facilities that got changed to March. Okay.
So the next three questions fired off from when you talked about industrial bin waste and recycling. So the first one was, what if a hauler is taking C&D to an industrial landfill? How would they count that?
Um, well, if it's not, right, so yeah, like I said, with C and D, we know that if it's contaminated with MSW, and we know this happens a lot, right? Unfortunately, it happens a lot. Um, a lot of that ends up in an MSW landfill. So if they actually take it to a ISW landfill instead, it's not, I don't think it's going to be classified as MSW anymore, right? And I guess it all depends on what the facility is characterized or classifying that waste as. Are they classifying it as industrial or are they classifying it as MSW? Um, Whatever it's being characterized as at the facility is what it needs to be reported as. But if it's being reported as C and D and it's ending up in an industrial cell and that's what they're still classifying it as C and D when it goes into the industrial cell, it's not MSW at that point, right? That's the way I understand that. Is if Scott's on, maybe he's got a better idea on that as well. But if he's
I
not
think
on
what
yet.
you, I think we, oh, I've been on since 10 minutes in.
Okay.
Um,
Cool.
I would agree with you. I mean, if it's going to an industrial, it's not MSW, and that's what score is. So
Yep.
And likewise, if that C and D is going to an MSW cell, it becomes MSW.
Right. So and that's the other, it can still be classified as C and D and still end up in an MSW cell. But if it's contaminated with MSW, it needs to be classified as MSW when it enters the cell. You can still put straight C and D into an MSW cell and classify it as C and D. You just have to pay the MSW tax on it. You can't tax it as C and D at that point.
Another question, Ben, related. So this county has an industry that makes prefab homes and they shred their scraps and sell for bedding. Can those tons be counted?
Yeah, I mean, I would say no. I mean, if we're not gonna, like, I had an example where there was a company that was building Bobcat, um, or skid steer buckets, and they recycled all of those cutoffs, metal cutoffs from manufacturing those buckets. And I told them that no, that's part of a manufacturing process. No, that doesn't count. That should not be included in score. So this seems very much the same thing. So no, I would not count that.
Okay, so a related question is, you said can't count materials to industrial waste for score. If C and D goes to a C and D landfill or MSW, you can count it, but if it goes to an industrial landfill, you can't. How does that make sense?
Okay, so let me be clear. Like, I'm talking about the recycling side when it comes to this stuff. So if shingles are getting recycled, or somebody's deconstructed a home and they're saving dimensional lumber that people can reuse, that's what I'm talking about being included in score. So, and the reason why we have been okay with those types of things being included in scores, because we know that those types of things have been being included in MSW over the years. So basically we're saying you don't have to count. If it's going to an ISW landfill, that would be on your disposal side, right? You'd have to consider that to be landfilling. We're saying you don't have to count that. But if it's being separated and recycled, you can include that on score. But you don't have to include C and D that's being properly disposed of in a C and D cell or an ISW cell. We just know that inadvertently a lot of C and D gets classified as MSW because it's contaminated. So we think it's fair to be able to include C and D recycling in the score report as well.
And the 2025 optional categories for C and D recycling and reuse will reflect that in hauler reporting in the future.
All right. The other question we have is pretty specific, Ben. It comes from Nathan with the waste energy facility. States, I'm planning on using the 4± % of ferrous and non-ferrous metals recycled at our metal recovery facility in 2024. This is the fraction of new ash coming from the waste to energy facility and will not include all the metal removed from previously landfilled ash since 1994. If we could count both the new ash and the landfill ash, our numbers would be 7.23%. Trying to get all the credit we can. And I assume, Nathan, that your question is, can you count all of that?
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, that's a hyper specific question. And there's a little bit to unpack there.
Do
I'm
we
just gonna
talk
ask.
about it offline since it is so
Yeah.
specific?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's probably best.
Okay. All right. Any more questions for Gabby or Ben? If you think about them, well, Scott's doing his presentation, that's totally okay. We'll just have some more Q&A at the end of Scott's section presentation. So fire up, Mr. Parr.
Oh, wait a minute. Clicked the wrong thing. All right. Hello, everyone. This is the facility portion of ReTrack. Ben did a pretty good job of explaining the flows that go on here. There's a couple things he mentioned that I'll reiterate, but kind of the first thing I like to start with is just if you've used it before, I sent an email out to all the people that are listed as the activated users. It should have the links that are shown here to ReTrack. If you haven't used it before, you can register. There's a PDF that was included with the email on how to do that. If the contact person has changed from a previous year and the previous person is no longer with the company or the county or whatever, you can reach out to me at this address and I will get you that information on how to get the account changed over. This comes up a handful of times every year that the facility has more than one person entering data. ReTrack unfortunately is set up that you can only have one username and password associated with each account. So it's just something that needs to be shared. So why isn't this doing? There we go. Couldn't get it to change pages. All facilities except for conditional case-specific beneficial use determinations or demonstration research projects, they'll get their own customized form. But PBRs, solid waste facilities, transfer stations, landfills, all you folks start off with two forms. The annual report submittal form contains the instructions. It starts off with just general information about ownership and contacts and things like that for the facility. But it's also important because that includes the instructions for submitting the electronic version of the annual report to us, and also some links to consolidate PDFs into one so you don't have to send a whole bunch of them. The other form that'll be on everybody's is the general information form. And we'll go into some nuances of this, but how you answer the questions in the general information form determines what other forms are created for you. You know, if you're a transfer station, there's no sense for you having the solid waste disposal land disposal form to fill out because you don't need it. So It's generated by where you enter information into the table on the general information, and that's the waste received. Um, and we'll get into more details on that. Due dates, much like the HOLA reporting, if you do have a case-specific beneficial use determination or demonstration research project, those annual reports are due February 1st. Everyone else is March 1st. Some videos I'm going to reference in a couple slides have the old date in it. We just haven't had those videos updated, mainly because that person left the agency and took her expertise in making videos with her. So, but just wanted people to be aware of that. These are the videos that are available. It was in the email that was sent out. And it goes through each kind of form that will or could be generated and just gives you some real snapshot. They're 3 to 5 minutes long, except for the general information, but that's a 7-page form, so it's about a 10-minute video. But it really gives you, if you haven't done it before, you've got questions, that would be the first place to check. Barbara did a really good job of going through and addressing most of the questions that come in. If you don't, again, you can reach out and contact me. We get to the end of the presentation. I got my contact information, besides just my email. You can also send a email through Retrack that I will get too. So there's lots of ways to get a hold of me to get your questions answered. Again, these are the two key tutorials. I don't know that I want to take the time to go through playing them for you. Now we got an hour, but I guess I'll show the short one. I won't show the whole thing, but because it's in YouTube, usually there's a commercial comes up. You can just skip over that and then you get right into the video. Be right back. Sorry, it's hard to stop that midstream. And I did it again. Where'd you go? All right. And like I say, the general information video is a bit longer, but also has really good information on proper ways to fill out that waste received table. Probably the most common one I run into is transfer stations putting in where the waste was disposed. That's the landfill. And that's what they're putting is how much of it went to the landfill, but that's not what the question is. It's how much was received at your facility and transferred to the landfill, and there's a separate column for that. One, there we go. Some tips for a good annual report. The stuff in Retrack is one piece of the report. It's all the forms and things like that. But depending on your permit, there's a lot of supporting documents that need to be included, including personnel training programs, records of who attended and stuff and when it was given, a summary of emergency and corrective actions taken during the year. That includes fires. We're trying to get a better handle on that with the advent of lithium batteries and the issues that they're causing. We can't work with the legislature to get some legislation to get better control, for lack of a better term, on the disposal of those, without providing some good information of what the problems is that they're providing, and it impacts everybody. I mean, when your facility goes up in smoke, you got to juggle things and where the waste is going now, and things like that. So please report those. There's also groundwater monitoring, gas monitoring, leachate, things like that. And another one that we commonly have to call people back on is an annual survey of the fill area. That must be completed, included in the annual report. If the solid waste land disposal, or in the solid waste land disposal activity form, please make sure that you're filling out the cost estimates for closure, post-closure, contingency action, and use the inflation adjustments. Those are also sent out with the reminder emails. If you don't have that, again, please feel free to contact me. The waste receipt for land disposal. We really try to discourage people from using other. I'll show you some examples that Trevor has put together for us, or for you, of what we mean by that. Again, it really, if everything gets tossed into other, it makes it really, really hard for the waste flow process that we try to work with. And that just means we got to call you guys and try to get things figured out and waste everybody's time. If it's filled out here properly, it makes everybody's job easier. And then in the composting activity form, if it's assigned to your facility, because of the information you filled in, the supporting documents for that include all the lab analyses that were conducted per your sampling plan, and a summary of temperature retention time for all the composted products. You don't have to include the daily record or daily temperature readings, but those other items should be included in your annual report. For those of you on here that maybe have permit by rule facilities, or beneficial use or demonstration research project, this is just a quick summary of the supporting documents there. For PBRs, you want an explanation of why recyclables have been stored longer than a year, if that is the case, and the approximate type and quantity being stored. That's usually for people that have like concrete or asphalt or something like that. And supporting documents for yard waste composting includes the sampling results for inert materials. And the beneficial use and demonstration research projects have their own little sampling and analysis items that are included in a specific document, so make sure you're checking those. Important, if 2024 is the only year that you beneficially used the solid waste, please make a note of that in the comments. And also, as I said, with the CS Bud and demonstration research project forms, if you have multiple things that you are beneficially reusing or researching, create a new form for each type of material. When you click on it, it'll say new. You can fill that all out and save it. There'll be a little box in the lower right hand corner that's got a number in it, but it'll still say new. So if you have multiple materials, again, fill out one form for each material type. Just some bigger all-around tips for good annual report data. Talk to your operators of the landfills, transfer stations, facilities. They're familiar with waste flow types and amounts and general waste trends. I'm going to make this plug several times. Ben already has, but if you are a landfill and you are getting material for a transfer station, or you're a transfer station sending all your material to one particular landfill, but you get waste from multiple counties, let each other know that, because there's on page 2 of the general information form, there is a breakdown of by county of where waste was received from. And if a landfill, one of the classic examples we've been running into is Spruce Ridge gets material from Meeker County Transfer Station. Well, Meeker County Transfer Station gets material from 3 other counties, but it's all being reported as coming from Meeker. So again, when we get into the CON and other types of issues that we use this data for, it really gets mucked up when Meeker County all of a sudden is getting reported as having sent more waste to a landfill than they even generate. So that's the kind of things that are important. Please update your contact information if it's changed for permitting or other solid waste programs by contacting the permit engineer for your facility so they can get that updated. It's also just good general information of incoming waste to the facility. Other forms are going to be going, the general information form is for stuff that's coming into the facility. All the other forms are for the waste that's going out of the facility. Tonnages should be close and, within a few percentage points. We know that, things come in wet and get dried before they get shipped out, and that can change a little bit, but we shouldn't have orders of magnitude differences. And then when converting waste from one waste measurement unit to another, there is a conversion factor that's been provided by EPA that again is in that reminder email. If you don't have it, I'm the one to contact, and I can get it to you very quickly. I mentioned this before, transfer stations should put the amount of waste they transferred, not landfilled. There's separate columns, column headings for that. Transfer stations also need to look at their permit with regards to financial assurance, because some have a closure requirement, some don't. So make sure you're checking your permit so we're not having to send you a letter and saying, hey, by the way, you still need to do this before we can say it's complete. Submit electronic copies with all the attachments that are required by your permit. And like I said, in the submittal form, the in-report submittal form, there are software packages, links to software packages that you can combine them all into one PDF, so you don't have to keep going round and round in circles through that process. As I mentioned with the CS buds and DRPs for material types, if you do recycling, do a separate form for each type of material that you recycle. Don't put them all on the one form. It looks like you can, but it just really messes up the internal report generating capabilities for people that want that information if you put it all in one form. Instructions again are on the annual report submittal form and in the online tutorials. And there have been a few small changes to the forms. This happens every year, and we'll go over those real quickly. In the general information form, the county's selection list on the counties served now includes out-of-state options in addition to all the Minnesota counties. It used to just say out-of-state, but again, for planning purposes, it's beneficial for us, and it's easy for you to be able to tell us which state it's going to. So they have been added to that drop-down box. In the solid waste transfer area, the destination name selection list now lists out-of-state options in addition to Minnesota. The examples we give here, there's one in North Dakota, a bunch of waste management facilities. If that's where your material is going from your transfer station, you can now put that in that drop-down box. And the waste types in that form for the solid waste transfer area now matches the one that's in the general information form. They weren't the same in the past. There was a lot of questions that people had on that as to which one should they use. Whatever you used in the general information form, you can now use in the solid waste transfer area form. I'm going to take a breath here and say, ask Trevor, is there anything on those changes for this year that I missed outlining for folks?
No, I think those are the big changes, just updating those out of state options, so we can track better, you know, which states and a few of those facilities that waste is commonly going to out of state. And then, yeah, just this change to the material types in the transfer report. That's about
Okay.
it.
All righty. So kind of beginning a summary here. All forms that are assigned to your facility must be filled out and the supporting documents submitted in order for it to be for the report to be complete. A single document can be created, again, with that link that I talked about in the annual report submittal form. I'm going to open that up. Oh, wait a minute. That's not what I wanted to do. Just on the form, there is a section right below all of the contact information that will give you those links. So here are the contacts for the different types of or different programs in ReTrack, their email addresses. And here's some phone numbers for people too. And I think, yep, that's my last one. So I will reopen it up for questions. Anything back for Ben and Gabby or myself, feel free.
And if you want to unmute yourself, you can also just verbally ask questions instead of typing them into the chat. And if you can't unmute yourself, it's one of the things I'm trying to figure out is how to unmute everybody. And if anybody's got any tips, let me know. But I believe you can unmute yourself if you've got questions instead of the chat.
Yeah, because I can't see the chat.
Okay, well, and again, tomorrow there's a full licensing section or meeting with the haulers, and Scott is doing his presentation tomorrow also. So fire away. Anything else to add, Gabby and Ben?
Hopefully we've covered it, and if any questions come to mind later on, folks can feel free to reach out.
Yep, same. And I know you guys know that. Feel free to ask me any questions about SCORE as well, and be looking for the SCORE report and the announcement email within the next couple weeks. I think we can give everybody about 40 minutes of time back. So thanks for attending, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.